Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle's best-known indie theater chain is in financial trouble. SIFF laid off 21% of its administrative staff last week. Freelance arts reporter and film critic Chase Hutchinson says our viewing habits have changed, and SIFF is just the latest in a series of recent struggles for indie theaters. We'll hear more from him in a minute, but first, let's get you caught up. A year from now, the Men's World Cup will kick off in North America. City officials will celebrate this morning by unveiling a countdown clock at Seattle Center at 10:30. The city was selected as one of 16 to host World Cup matches next summer. Seattle will host 6 matches, one of which will include Team USA. A rent-fixing technology could soon be banned in Seattle. The Seattle City Council will consider a bill today that would prohibit landlords and rental companies from using algorithmic rent-fixing software. Critics say these software services enable collusion and can artificially inflate the price of housing. The legislation is being introduced by outgoing Councilmember Kathy Moore. She says the goal is to prevent renters from being displaced. Meanwhile, Washington State has filed a lawsuit against the software company RealPage, alleging that it violated the state's Consumer Protection Act. Today's City Council meeting starts at 9:30. And Washington is sending more than 200 firefighters north of the border to help fight wildfires in Canada. State officials say the firefighters and equipment are headed to Alberta and Saskatchewan, where several large wildfires are burning. The assistance is part of a regional compact which includes several states, including Oregon, Idaho, and Hawaii. Washington's Department of Natural Resources say they remain fully staffed and are prepared to respond to potential wildfires in our state. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. SIFF has been a Seattle institution since 1976. If you've been to one of SIFF's 4 movie theaters, you likely weren't going to see a big summer blockbuster. The organization prides itself on bringing independent and international cinema to Seattle audiences. It's been a struggle to keep movie theaters afloat since 2020, and SIFF isn't immune. The festival has shrunk in scale in recent years, and last week, 9 people were laid off. Things seemed much different in 2023. With financial assistance from the city, SIFF was able to purchase the Cinerama and turn it into SIFF Cinema downtown. Now the organization is at a crossroads. It's unclear if layoffs will help them bounce back financially. Freelance arts reporter and film critic Chase Hutchinson is here to talk about SIFF's financial struggles and what might change at Seattle's best-known indie movie theaters. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Chase, when you spoke to the SIFF chief operating officer, she told you that inaction, and this is a quote, would likely lead to SIFF's closure. SIFF is so well known here, and they just bought the Cinerama in 2023. They bought a movie theater, Chase. To hear that closure is even on the table is surprising.
It was a moment that took me aback as well. I think that what we have seen with other theaters closing makes it something that you have to be thinking about. And in addition to the chief operating officer, every single worker that I talked to there also is concerned about this. The way they come at it, though, is that this type of downsizing is going to be challenging for SIFF going forward because reaching new people, finding new audiences requires people who are finding creative ways to do so, and now there's less capacity to do that. Whether SIFF is able to bounce back from this moment, I think they're hoping this will be the start of that. It's just certainly going to be something that changes how people interact with SIFF in ways potentially big and small that we're going to see over the next few months.
For listeners who might not get it, what's the big story here? What's happening at SIFF?
Well, a week ago, I got a tip that there were going to be significant layoffs at SIFF. There have been reductions in the past, but nothing like what we saw last week, which ended up being 21% of their administrative staff, or 9 people, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're an arts organization that is already pretty slim, that's a pretty significant cut. And some of these people had worked there for years, built SIFF into what it was, and their loss is already something that has people pretty concerned about the future of the organization.
I read in your piece they're losing a lot of institutional knowledge. What might change for fans of cinema?
That's something that is currently the big question, because there is a lot that is still being worked out. But from speaking to various people, the concern could be that SIFF no longer has the flexibility that it had in the past, because there's now less people, less capacity to do some of the work with their schedule that sometimes brings in the films that nobody else was showing. It could be that people see less of the films or less of the community programming that they might have been familiar with or appreciative of.
Help me understand what flexibility means in this case.
Sure. So essentially, the SIFF programming schedule it was described to me like a puzzle where there are lots of different moving pieces, and oftentimes reaching out directly to distributors and getting everything in place. There are now less people doing a lot of these different things, which also includes putting things on the websites, promoting them, the very nuts and bolts work. It sounds like there is still a commitment to, as I spoke to executive director Tom Mara, to still have that discovery element to SIFF, to where you can find this independent and international cinema, but it is now going to be with less people to get those things both in front of people, promoted, the word out. It's a challenge. It's an existential moment for the organization.
The people who were laid off have had their last day. What have you heard from them, Chase?
I've been in conversation with several people that have been impacted. They haven't commented to me on the record because they're still waiting to hear from SIFF about what their future is going to look like. So I don't want to speak too much to them. But what I've generally heard from staff is that morale is at an all-time low, that there's a big, serious concern about what the next few days, the next few weeks, the next several years are going to look like to the organization.
Hard time to ask your staff to pick up the work of their laid-off colleagues.
Yeah, and it's something that was, in talking with lots of different people, something that blindsided them. The festival had just wrapped up, and it was a good year for the festival, at least from the programming perspective. What I've heard anecdotally about the attendance, I'm still waiting to hear from SIFF about the numbers themselves, but the last few years have been positive. The thing that SIFF has said is it's that the festival is not a meaningful driver of revenue. It is still the most visible programming that they do, and one of the things that people get excited about every year, but it wasn't enough to fill the gaps that they were seeing over the past few months.
Like we mentioned at the top there, SIFF is different from other theater chains, Chase. They go beyond the summer blockbuster, the Marvel movie. You mentioned community programming. What else gives SIFF its spirit? And at a time of low morale, would that be going away?
What you had said at the beginning was that it's international and independent cinema. And one of the films that I had specifically asked people at SIFF about was this film called April that showed at the festival and then had a smaller run outside of it that was wider. It's that international independent movie that is not going to show anywhere else. To me, it's one of the best movies of the year, but it's just not something that people would have access to if SIFF were no longer here. There are also events that SIFF does that are with older movies, introductions in front of American Psycho that I had seen not too long ago that was really great and recontextualized it and opened up new conversation around a film that was maybe old, and it was with a packed house. It's those things that I imagine people still care about, because I've talked to lots of staff, and the universal thing I've heard from them is we care about SIFF. We care about connecting with the community. We care about film as art. And the people that are still there are going to continue to do that work. It is just going to be a very different new normal for them and for the organization as a whole.
We've been talking about staff cuts, but there's also infrastructure issues. You mentioned in your piece that the SIFF Egyptian is still closed after flooding from last year. What do the layoffs mean for those repairs and for the big things that need to be fixed in that theater?
The SIFF FAQ that they put out addressing the Egyptian is that they might not have the same capacity to get the Egyptian back and reopen. Still a lot of uncertainty there. I had been told when I reported on it last year that there was not a chance that it was going to be open for the festival this year, which was a significant impact. They had some of their big festival events there. A couple years ago, they had the closing night film I Like Movies. That was a huge hit. And now they've had to rearrange some things. They again say that that might not have made up the revenue shortfalls that they were seeing, but it is still an impact. It is still something that they're going to have to contend with.
We've seen a few movie theater closures over the past few months. AMC 10, Grand Illusion, both of those come to mind because they're right outside our KUOW studios in the University District here. Is it a challenge just to operate movie theaters in the city right now?
I think so. And not just in the city, I would say around the world in many regards. Just when I was driving here, you see the Grand Illusion that's closed down. And that was obviously a big loss. They're still doing some of their pop-up screenings, which is very exciting. But that was something that was notable. There's the Northwest Film Forum that recently had some layoffs, but are still going as well. There's the Arc Lodge that closed down, but then was bought by the Tasveer Film Festival that I reported on a while ago. So there's ways to find new life in these places, but it is having to contend with real challenges that require really looking hard at how you are going to survive the next several years, especially post-pandemic where viewership has changed, where audiences maybe don't go see as many movies, to not going out to the theater as much.
SIFF said in its downsizing FAQ that it's been relying on a mix of donations, pandemic relief funding, and government grants, things that have become unstable. How much of SIFF's story is the story of arts nonprofits in 2025?
I think a lot of it, because the specific part that you're referring to said that those funding avenues make up about 40% of SIFF's revenue, which is huge. And so any sort of potential loss there is going to be significant for them. And it's something lots of arts nonprofits are having to contend with in 2025 as that becomes less and less of a priority to the powers that be.
Is it fair to say that SIFF's future is uncertain?
There's much about SIFF's future that is uncertain. I'll say that. I think that would be a fair categorization. I'm still waiting to hear back from SIFF about the hourly reductions, because it's not just the people that were laid off. It's the people that are the projectionists, the members of the union. They've been told that there are going to be hourly reductions. I heard from a member of the union saying that this is going to lead to a lot of financial uncertainty and insecurity. And so I'm curious to hear more about what exactly that looks like for them, whether people I've spoken to, they have to try and take other jobs and make considerations like that as they continue to want to work for this organization, but also find a way to keep making a living.
Like a lot of people in the city right now. Like a lot of people.
It's not specific to SIFF. There's great reporting out there about just how the city has become more expensive for arts workers and what culturally we lose when that happens.
What are you going to be looking for in the weeks and months ahead for SIFF? When might we learn something?
Well, the first thing I would say is I'm always looking for more people to reach out, because I think there are many people that are going to be impacted by this, and I'm just here to listen and get as much clarity as I can. The things that I'm looking at are the Egyptian, because that is a symbolic moment for SIFF when that closed, and if it reopens, what does that look like? Does that mean that staffing hours can come back? I'm going to be looking at their programming. I follow week by week SIFF's programming very, very closely, both as part of my job and as someone who likes to see what's showing. And I'm hoping that there can still be some of the films that you wouldn't see elsewhere still showing there. But it's an uncertain thing. I think then the other thing I'll be looking at is this the end? I'm hoping there aren't any sort of more layoffs, but that is something that it sounds like could potentially happen based on people I've talked to, or if there could be more hourly reductions as well.
One more question before I let you go.
Yes.
Could we see bigger run Marvel-type movies to try to pay the bills, Chase?
Well, the interesting thing, and I've talked with people about this, the more I think success model based on people I've talked to is a movie like Sinners, which became a huge event-type movie that was not a sequel or a remake, so spoke to kind of a audience that is hungering for those types of things, but also was a crowd-pleasing, fun movie that people came out to see. So I don't know if the Marvel-esque movie is going to be the same as something like Sinners for SIFF, but it might be that there are different programming decisions that are being made, because not every movie is going to be an event like Sinners in the same way. That was a big, wonderful surprise, which you can talk about why it is that certain filmmakers are often underestimated in certain ways. But moments like that, I feel like, could potentially be a boost for smaller theaters like SIFF, but also they're lightning in a bottle sometimes. You can't always count on every movie to be an event.
Really interesting, really interesting. Chase Hutchinson is a freelance arts reporter and critic. Really appreciate your insight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.